Hi, I'm Adam, the Learning Coach. If you're a jazz musician, you've probably transcribed solos from a jazz record. I have one here that I've transcribed and I'm going to play it for you, and I want to know if you can identify this solo. Is that something you've ever heard before? You may have trouble identifying that solo, even if you have heard it a million times. And there's a reason for that. And it has to do with what happens when you transcribe a solo and what's missing from that transcription. You might recognize the solo if I played the actual track from you off the album. Does that sound familiar to you? Most people have heard Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album, and that is the first solo from the first track, So What? Let's take a look at the transcription. So this is a transcription of Miles Davis's solo from So What? If you're not familiar with music notation, each of these dots represents how long he played and how high or low he played. So pitch and rhythm, basically. Let's listen to the track again while following along, and then even if you don't read music, you'll kind of get the idea. And that's it. So what's wrong with that transcription? Isn't it enough? Well, as you heard me play it on the piano, you didn't necessarily recognize it. And one is obvious, the reason is because it is a trumpet solo, not a piano solo, but there's more to it than that. I am not phrasing this thing the way Miles phrased it. If you listen to this solo, you'll hear how Miles takes his time in certain places and maybe rushes ahead. There's a lot of ebb and flow in what he's doing. Hear how the delays there? How it sounds a little like he's You may not have the ears to tell that he is behind the beat, but the drummer is keeping it pretty steady. And Miles is behind it. Da da na, da da na, da na na, da na da na na na. Now I'm not copying him exactly, but see if you can begin to hear how Miles is just a little behind what the drummer is doing. And the drummer's not being perfectly steady either, but he's being pretty steady. And Miles is moving in and out of him, kind of like somebody weaving in traffic a little bit. And that's what makes this solo sound like Miles. And that's what you can learn from these solos more than the notes themselves. The notes themselves are valuable, the rhythms, the pitch, but it's that phrasing, how you turn it into a human being. That's what you're really looking for when you're trying to get these solos. By way of comparison, let's listen to what the saxophone solo by John Coltrane sounds like when I just play just the notes on the piano, just at the beginning of it. Now let's go and listen to the real thing. slightly different experience listening to Coltrane versus Miles. Both of them play with the beat. Both of them phrase things in their own way. There's a limit to how well you can express these kinds of pushes and pulls in Western music notation. It's not very good at expressing rhythms in general. And when you get into the subtleties of I am a jazz musician versus I am a jazz musician, just where you get these places where you're in between the beats, that's very hard. It's easier to memorize it, use your transcription as a guide, and make the adjustments yourself humanly rather than in the notation itself. But my main point is you want to be sure you're noticing these changes, these differences. Start to listen to places where you're ahead of the beat or where you're behind the beat. Because this is where the life is in the music. This is where you get into the difference between something a computer could write versus something a person could play. The infinite tiny details that can change even from performance to performance for the musician. Not just the way someone speaks, but what they want to say at that time. So we'll get into how to do a transcription in a later video if it's something you want to know. But I just wanted you to be aware of just how much there is in a jazz solo that you might not have put down on paper. If this is helpful to you, I would love for you to leave me a comment. And if I can be of use to you, please contact me. See you next time.